Yeah, I'm back. No, thank you. I'm back for another couple months. If you don't know me, my name's Billy McMillan. I wouldn't say that I have reached healthiness, but I appreciate you praying for my concussion symptoms over the last couple months. Not quite there yet, not quite healthy, but the time has come to start the job search again. And so a couple of weeks ago, over the last couple of weeks, I have sent 17 different job applications in. I received 4 responses back, which is not bad, I guess, maybe, in a job search. One was a clear rejection. They didn't even look at it, so I don't know why they sent that to me. For much of the last 7 years, I have worked at a job where almost every day I went to work feeling like I was not enough. And so one of my main objectives in this job search is to not feel that way again in my next job. But have you looked at a job posting lately? Maybe those of you who don't have to look for jobs won't, but if you see them, they look something like this. We're looking for someone with the wisdom of a 50-year-old, the experience of a 40-year-old, the drive of a 30-year-old, and the pay scale of a 20-year-old. And when you look at the job description, the words they use are things like, do you want to be part of a dynamic, fast-paced, high-volume environment? And do you have an ambitious work ethic? And the words just keep flowing and my head starts to hurt. Some people have described job descriptions as looking for God on a good day. I had 2 telephone interviews over the last couple of weeks, and both of them sent me a rejection a few days later with almost the exact same wording, so I'm thinking maybe they're using ChatGPT or something. It reads like this: we received an overwhelming response to the position, which makes us feel both humble and proud that so many talented individuals like you want to join our team. This volume of response makes for an extremely competitive selection process. Although your background is impressive, we regret to inform you that we have decided to pursue other candidates for the position at this time. The job search is one rejection after another rejection after another rejection. It can be quite tough. You're never quite good enough. Does that sound familiar to you? You're not thin enough, strong enough, fast enough, smart enough, pretty enough, muscular enough. You're not productive enough. You're not doing enough, not being efficient enough, not growing enough, not volunteering enough, or giving enough, or traveling enough, or ambition enough. You're not sorry enough. Our culture tells us to do better, be better, do more. You're not living your best life. You need this product to complete your life. And there's always somebody who is doing more and doing better. And you can always look at someone and say, I'm not as good as so-and-so. And then there's the Christian version. I'm not patient enough, kind enough, loving enough, peaceful enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not sacrificing enough. I'm not giving enough. And at the end of another day, when you felt like you weren't allowed to say no, or you wouldn't be a very good Christian, you're discouraged and overwhelmed and exhausted. I can't be or do anymore. I'm not enough. I went down the rabbit hole on this topic over the last 3 weeks. Hopefully I won't have that much break again, or else we'll never get through anything. And I was was trying to listen to this book by Thomas Curran called The Perfection Trap. He talks about one of the most common questions that you get when you're on the job search and you go to an interview, where they say, what is your greatest weakness? And the most common answer is, well, I guess I'm kind of a perfectionist. In fact, if you look up what not to say when people say, what is your greatest weakness? HR people tell you, do not say, well, I'm kind of a perfectionist, because all of us are kind of perfectionists in some ways. Kern calls perfectionism our fatal flaw. We know that perfectionism is not really healthy, but we still let it guide us. He says that perfectionism is not just that you have high standards, not just that you're striving for excellence. It's a way of existing that defines who we are and defines the things and interprets the things other people do and say. And it's rooted in the core belief that we're not perfect enough, and that our flaws can be sealed if we could just be more perfect and nothing but perfect. I used to have 30 slides in this slide deck, so I've reduced it, so I'm going to take just the conclusions of what he says about perfectionism and the perfect trap. First of all, when we talk about perfectionism, we're not talking about some people, or even about whether one is or isn't a perfectionist. We're talking about all of us, all people, and the extent to which we are more or less perfectionist. Brené Brown writes in her book titled The Gifts of Imperfection, Let Go of Who You Think You're Supposed to Be and Embrace Who You Are. She says, research shows that perfectionism hampers success. It's often the path to depression, anxiety, addiction, and life paralysis. And Thomas Curran agrees. He says that perfectionism contributes to a plethora of health problems: anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and a variety of other things, anorexia, bulimia, all of these. And the problem is that perfectionism has no relationship to success. We often think about perfectionism as the way that you get success. You just have to get it right. But in fact, perfectionism has no discernible relationship to success when you try to research it. And finally, perfectionism, particularly what he calls socially prescribed perfectionism, is rising at an exponential pace. He talks about three kinds of perfectionism. One is that internal sense that you have to be perfect. Then there's the other sort of oriented perfectionism where other people tell you that you have to be perfect. Maybe you had a boss like that, or maybe your parents were like that, and they were always saying, you're not enough, you need to be better, you need to do more. But then there's a certain, and that's always been kind of high within people. But there is also a third one, which is called socially prescribed perfectionism, which means that other people, that is society, expects us in some way to be perfect. Two professors in Toronto have made up a perfectionism scale, and over the last 30 years, they have given it to college students. And what Kern discovered was that over the last 40 years, that the incidence of the way that people feel about socially prescribed perfectionism is going up exponentially. That is, that college students say more than they've ever before said, I feel like society says I need to be perfect. Why is that? One, because of social media, right? Because I don't know how many of you have practiced your Instagram photos, right? How do I take a selfie? My hair is not right, my smile's not right, I do it again, and I do it again, and I do it again. Instagram, Facebook tell us that we need to present to the rest of the world a perfect image. And college and teenage students have said, I feel that more than ever before. The second reason that it's increasing is because our economy is essentially an economy of more. That it only works if people feel discontent, if they feel dissatisfied with what they have. In the Western world, we have what we need. What we don't have is what we want. And so an advertising world only works if it turns wants into needs. So, how do you hear it when I say to you, good enough? Do you hear, good enough is never good enough? Do you hear, it's just okay, or it's mediocre? Or do you hear, it's not just good, it's good enough? That does the trick. That's all that's necessary. It's not just good, it's good enough. How do you hear it? How do you hear those words? Over the next couple months, we're going to engage in a series of now I'm catching up, sorry. Over the next couple months, I want to engage in a variety of topics relating to the good enough life. I want to play with this idea of being good enough and ask the question, perhaps as a thought experiment that you can come along with me with, what does it mean to embrace grace as good enough? What if you were to define grace as good enough? I want you to think through that as we walk through it the next few days. Christians over the centuries have had an interesting relationship to perfectionism. In her book, Good Enough, Kate Bowler talks about how two ways in particular that Christian denominations and people have tried to figure out what does God expect of us when it comes to perfection. If you Google Christian and good enough, you're actually going to come up with you're not good enough. And so there is a first slant that says God is perfect. There's no way that you can meet his requirements. Therefore, you are not good enough. But if that message continues after you have accepted Jesus, then something's wrong. We shouldn't be still saying, I'm not good enough, when we've accepted the one who is good. And so a second group of people will say, Christians are on the road to perfection. In fact, they will say you're so much on the road that you're actually going to get there. Ironically, what happens is, if I'm not there, then I'm not good enough, right? So the claim that you can be perfect functions for lots of Christians as a negative way of saying, you're not good enough. Try harder. Be more. And then, of course, there is what our bookstore tells us, that you can be anything that you want to be. And for the right emotional, mental, and physical pain, we can help you get there. Or they might say, you are perfect just the way you are. You just need to look into your heart and find self-acceptance. Ultimately, good enough lies in the point somewhere between the two poles, between nothing is good enough and you're already good enough. Perfection is impossible, but transformation towards the goal of perfection is possible. As we've talked about before, the New Testament writers talk about perfection or growth in or salvation in three tenses. That is, they will say, you have already been made perfect by what Jesus did on the cross, but you also are being perfected now in this already not yet period, and you will be completely perfected when Jesus comes again. But you can't do it on your own. God is working with you. So living the good enough life, in my mind, requires us to do some rethinking about how we define some words. The first is this, that living the good enough life means redefining what it means to be successful, to have found success. Avram Alpert writes in his book, The Good Enough Life, that we must get over our myth of the value of greatness in every sphere of life. That the only people who can actually talk are the people who are great at something. Good enoughness is about understanding that part of what it means to be human is to confront inevitable failure. The good enough life is about learning how to live without needing to be the best. Success that requires constant high performance is like a treadmill that keeps speeding up. You can keep up to it for a while, but have you ever seen somebody fall off the end of the back of it? When you can't keep up, it leads to a huge crash. We don't need to be great to be successful. We need to be good enough. Let me back up. As I grew up, somewhere along the line, I've got this impression that I had to be God's representative good as what was good. And when I was a kid, I got beat up a lot. And I got beat up a lot because they would call me Bible thumper or goody two-shoes because I was trying to be good. We used to play hockey on the road beside the school every recess in the winter. And I remember I was somewhere between 10 and 12 years old when I was playing hockey one day, and a kid named Robert, who was in the grade below me, must have slashed me. Something like that got rough. And so I responded by swearing at him. I still remember that incident, even though I was 10 to 12. I'm 55 tomorrow. And I remember that incident today. Many of you probably have also felt that burden of saying, I'm not a very good Christian. I've let God down. I need to work harder. Many of us have grown up living under the tyranny of what I call should. We hear sermons and read books and thinks, I got to do it. I got to apply it better. I've got to be better. I've got to be a better Christian. I need to pray more and read more and give more. And this is Paul's response. Let me put this question to you. How did your new life begin? Was it by working your heads off to please God, or was it by responding to God's message to you? Are you going to continue this craziness? For only crazy people would think they could complete by their own efforts what was begun by God. If you weren't smart enough or strong enough to begin it, how do you suppose you could perfect it? Did you go through this whole painful learning process for nothing? It's not yet a total loss, but it certainly will be if you keep this up. The Christian life's not about effort. It's not about trying harder. It's about accepting who we are in God's eyes because of what God has already done for us. God is more interested in our growth than in our comfort. So, living the good life will mean redefining success. And the opposite then will also be true, that living the good life will mean redefining failure. 3 times, Paul says, I appealed to the Lord about this thorn in the flesh that he gave me, that it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient or enough for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. So, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, read my failures, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For whenever I am weak, then I am strong. Trying to be the best, to be great, to be more, to get it right, is not the way God works. He calls us to embrace grace as enough. Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said that discipleship is merely the reception of grace. And so maybe idolizing the people in our culture who are able to do great things is not what we should do. In fact, maybe we should be more like this lady. Take chances, make mistakes, get messy. Failure and risk become natural when we live out of the grace of who God says we are, rather than trying to earn our spot by being perfect. Good enough helps us to move on. Done is better than perfect. And when we accept that, then creativity and risk will flourish. Living the good enough life means also redefining results. In Hebrews chapter 11, there's a list of a pile of people from the Old Testament that were considered part of what we would say the faithful Hall of Fame. Abraham, Isaac, Sarah, Jacob, Moses. And near the end of the section, we have this. And what more shall I say? For time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets. Yeah, look at that list. If you've read your Old Testament, what do you know about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David? What do all these guys have in common? They didn't get it right. They were maybe not models all the time. They often failed more than they succeeded. They made questionable choices. Their judgment was questionable, but they were faithful in their allegiance to God. And they only received partially the promised rewards, but not because they weren't faithful enough, but rather, as we read on, we see that some others were tortured, not accepting release to obtain resurrection to a better life, and others experienced mocking and flogging and chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, sawed apart, murdered with the sword. I just remember reading this in junior high and thinking, this is cool. Anyways, they went about in sheepskins and goatskins. They were destitute, afflicted, ill-treated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains and caves and openings in the earth. And these were all commended for their faith, but they did not receive what was promised. Faithfulness doesn't always win, but it is enough. We live in what you might call a toxic achievement culture. Everything is comparison and competition. You want to be better, be extraordinary, do more. But the reality is that grace marks differently. When I was in grade 12 chemistry, I had a teacher named Mr. Close. He was difficult. But one year, he went to, where we just talked about earlier, Great Lakes Christian College. For some reason, he was gone for the whole week, so he thought it was a great opportunity for self-study. So he came back a week later, and we had a test. There was a girl in our class. Her name was Dora Chan. Dora, I don't know if she ever experienced something less than 98. When Mr. Close came back, we had a test, and Dora Chan got 50. I got 39. I thought that is success. If Dora Chan only gets 50, 39 is excellent, right? When I became an accountant, our CGA courses were always pass-fail courses. So as long as you got over 50 or 60, depending on which class it was in, it did not matter whether you got 62, 65, 98, irrelevant. The only thing that matters was, did you get to the mark of 50? And if you did, it was good enough. No one ever asks me what I got on a grade on some course. They just want to know, did you pass? Yes, then you're good enough. And God has already declared that you and I have passed. So living the good enough life means redefining results. Therefore, my dear friends, Paul says, as you have already obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. And then finally, living the good enough life means redefining enough. So let's talk about accounting. I know that's what you want to be talking about. Let's talk about a concept called materiality. We'll just read it. Materiality leads an auditor accountant to give you an unqualified opinion. It says an unqualified opinion is issued when auditors examine an entity's financial statements and conclude that no material misstatements are present. It indicates that the financial statements are prepared and presented in all material respects complying with applicable accounting standards. What is material? Materiality in accounting refers to the relative size of an amount and the impact it makes on the financial statements. So accountants will say that large sums of money are material and relatively small sums are immaterial. This means they don't have a significant impact. Materiality, then, if you're going to define it, is equal to good enough. It's not to the penny. Materiality is contextual. What is material, that is, makes a difference or is good enough to know for my budget, is completely immaterial to Suncor's budget. They don't care about pennies, dimes, nickels, quarters, dollars, tens of dollars, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, maybe millions of dollars. But under that, doesn't matter. It's good enough, close enough. The other law you might remember is the one that's called diminishing returns. At a certain point, the value you get from increased effort becomes almost negligible. The attempt to attain perfection can be counterproductive and cost more than it's worth. So living the good enough life means redefining enough. Let's skip this one. And finally, living the good enough life means redefining what enough means. Dallas Willard said, "We will never have the easy, unhesitating love of God that makes obedience to God our natural response unless we are absolutely sure that it is good for us to be and to be who we are." Often Christians seem to follow what Larry Crabb calls the law of linearity. If I do X, then God will do Y. One of his friends describes it this way: we wipe our own noses, wash our faces, and sew the rip in our clothes. In other words, we make ourselves presentable, and then we say to God, "Look what I've done. I've got it right. My nose is clean. Now, give me the blessings I want." In other words, we try to wrest back control from God. We revert to wanting our kingdom and our goals in place of his. Rather than being faithful, we end up rejecting his love and grace for our own perspective. But embracing God's grace doesn't view our lives like that. God brings us himself, and he sees us as one of his children. He's more like my mother. Try to tell her that I'm not good enough. Not going to work. Your identity is secure because God loves you. As Dallas Willard writes, it's okay to be who you are, wherever you are. God can work with that. So living the good enough life means redefining success, failure, results, and enough. This morning, I'm trying to bring you an invitation, not to do more, but to do less. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." As the title of Larry Crabb's book tells us, the pressure's off. What if God already thinks that you are enough? What if that's true? Paul said, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. God is enough, and he loves us and makes us enough too, and he thinks we're pretty great. That's kind of my summary of Ephesians. And as Paul once wrote, my paraphrase is, it's no big deal for me to tell you that again. In the Middle Ages, the great reformers Martin Luther and Philip Melanchthon were having a discussion about what they were going to do today. And Melanchthon said, Martin, this day we will discuss the governance of the universe. In other words, let's get busy. Let's be productive. To which Luther responded, Philip, this day you and I will go fishing and leave governance of the universe to God. I want to practice just for a few minutes as we end here this morning, thinking and entering into the rest that God offers. I want to use the beginning words of Psalm 46, which you are familiar with. What I'd like you to do is just think about this phrase, be still and know that I am God. So for a few moments, I just want you to be quiet, and I will click through and just start removing words, and I want you to just follow through. So first, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. As we walk through this phrase, imagine that God is sitting down beside you now and saying, hey, let's take a break. You've done enough for now. Be still. And be. God is here, and because he is here, he is enough. And you don't need to do any more right now. Just be. So let's stand and just sing this verse together. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. As we leave this place today, I want to leave you with this blessing from Kate Bowler. A blessing for a joyfully mediocre journey. Blessed are you who realize there is simply not enough time, money, or resources. Blessed are you who are tired of pretending that raw effort is the secret to perfection. It's not. And you know that now. Blessed are you who need a gentle reminder that even now, even today, God is here. And somehow, that is good enough. Go in peace.